Regarding what is non-existent, there are no levels of realization to traverse, and so there are never any paths to journey along. Since utter lucidity is already ensured as the supreme sphere of being, there are no mandalas to visualize through the proliferation and resolution of thoughts, and no mantras, recitations, empowerments, or samaya. There is no non-referential stage of completion, such as a gradual process of dissolution. In the kayas and timeless awareness, which are already ensured timelessly, there is no causality based on compounded adventitious circumstances. If any of these were the case, timeless awareness would not occur naturally. Being compounded, such awareness would be subject to destruction, and then how could it be characterized as spontaneously present and uncompounded? Therefore, within the essence of ultimate basic space, causality is transcended and the 10 attributes do not pertain. Mind itself, the ultimate meaning of genuine being, involves no effort or achievement. Please understand this in order to pacify all conceptual elaborations of existence and non-existence. This is the 5th section of the precious treasury of the basic space of phenomena, demonstrating the transcendence of effort and achievement, cause and effect. We continue with Longchenpa. Well, Sakadawa, everything we do on Sakadawa, the selling point is that everything we do on Sakadawa of good merit or bad is multiplied just endless trillions of times. So if you know what you're doing as a practitioner, you walk a bit of a tightrope. If you're really not on, kindness and intention of bodhisattvahood, how much, how many of us are in that capacity and how much of the time and how authentically it is an obvious question. Not too many of us, not too often, and not that deeply. That would be a reasonable guess. But kids, this is not your grandma's dharma. I'm not talking about the same kind of stuff they were talking about when the hippies came back in the 60s, when lots of things culturally were unclear. There was a lot of change that's now settled in 50 years later, 60 years later. If you were born in the past, in the 90s, in the 2000s, this might be your great-grandma's dharma I'm referring to. So the people that are a decade ahead of me, the next generation, the generation preceding me, my brother's generation, born in the 50s. And at the end of that is the boomers. And I guess I'm at the end just like the last year. I don't know. It never occurred to me that I was in any way in the same generation as those people, quote unquote. And they see things still so different. So different. But, then there's my generation, growing into high school into the 70s, born in the 60s, growing up in the 70s. And that era is when a lot of this stuff that people consider dharma and sort of sell or preach or put forward as, let's say non-judgmentally, put forth as dharma. So much of it comes from this time frame, and that's not what we do here on the 12-step Buddhist, number 92. So Sakadawa is the birth of the Buddha. And we're in this zone always looking into the birthless state. So it kind of sounds funny, cleverly, the birth of the birthless. It really is the only way you could describe it, because it is and it isn't. It's unborn in the absolute state of Buddha, of full total realization state, unborn, undying, immovable, impenetrable. I know there was the unmoved mover part of I think it was Aristotle. 100% sure I remember that correctly. But I always thought the unmoved mover was a small notion within that time, but it's a profound notion in what we're doing here in the Dharma we practice on the 12-Step Buddhist podcast. Since 2008, ad-free. Go to the podcast page, podcast.compassionaterecovery.us. That's US. Hit the donation spot for me. Support the efforts. So Sakadawa isn't celebration, and how can we celebrate? Well, today I celebrated with our group, as always, on Zoom, going into our 4th year now. COVID going away didn't slow us down too much. We still have the same group practicing Chud. Look for more about that in my next book as I'm going into it. Of course, I've gotten supremely distracted from the new occupation to try to have some way to catch up, climb up. Obviously, there's agreement in the room. But we have the relative condition, and in the sense, the birthless is birthed, because what's birthed is our awareness. What's birthed is our, it's really immersion, man. It's like, here's the thing. I've been listening to lots and lots of teachings, but before I was listening to those teachings, I was doing practices more, and there was a break in between lots and lots of retreats, compounded, regular, really just a lot of practice sessions and just really relaxed kind of setting, but really going deep into the lineage practices as a collective. And when you do it as a collective, there's a way to lock in or to drop in or to open up or to have a more empowered, to empower, to have an empowerment, to be empowered, by the collective, say the, for a Jungian, term, a collective conscious, or not a collective unconscious, but a collective consciousness, which is the birth, right, in the relative state, and consciousness of the experience of the nameless, the birthless, of the wordless. So, listen to in the sound dimension, just listen. In the Zen field of practice, which I really enjoyed and participated in, but struggled with in many ways for many reasons, but there's some good pith dharma in there, And after you're on a, few days into a longer kind of retreat of intensive practice sessions of sitting still and silent with your back straight, facing the wall with your eyes partially open, and don't fidget, and just sit there and be aware. There's really no instruction, like you have no idea why you're doing it. And you can't get an answer from anybody. Some people seem to think like they know what they're doing, but ultimately you can realize by watching them that there's nothing there to follow. But in the Zen path and in the Zen way, the experience of Zen in an applied and collective group manner. I mean, take a yoga personal lesson and take a class with 40 people at 110 degrees. I mean, come on. Breathe as one. Breathe, with the music as one. Breathe with your steps as one. Walk like a Buddha. Put your feet on the ground, massaging the earth like the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh would say, have done myself for many years, many times. And how do we enter into the sound dimension? How are we being refuge? How are we being birthed? How are we birthing? Well, we can do it with our experience that we're having by letting the experience arise sans resistance. Merci, mon ami, par favor. No resistance. Resistance is blocking everything. Because it's another dimension to drop into Buddha. It's Buddha dimension, but it's the same dimension that we're in. How does that make sense? Well, it can't in words, and words are stupid. So I was kind of tired of listening to words, but I've learned over the years that, there's listening to words and then there's focusing single-pointedly on the teacher. Now, many years ago, I would sit in retreats and watch long-term, lifetime monks for, monks that were born in that, and monks that came up in that 60s revolution, Dharma, LSD, Ram Dass kind of era and culture, right? Many years later, sitting just, monks of Lama Yeshe, just sitting in front of Lama Zopa, just not moving for hours. I was in the room. They didn't move. They didn't fidget. They didn't, I mean, just single pointed. And so when you really understand transmission that way, and you can get a Dharma transmission in Zen after, I don't know, a lot of things and a lot of steps in a long time, and maybe, and what does it mean, and what is it really, and it's just like it's only for a few, and you can just get in transmission of Buddha Dharma. The last lines of the pith instructions, any lines of the pith instructions that we read from Longchenpa, say it. But the birthless didn't start. It's not going anywhere. In AA, we used to say, well, if you can't find God, it's not because he moved, it's because you did. Well, in a way, we put ourselves in the feng shui. We tap into the flow, like I was speaking of recently. And the easiest thing to flow in is joy and connection and heart service. Does a dog have Buddha nature? I mean, all sentient beings have Buddha nature. All sentient beings are birthed into the birthless, birthed from the birthless into birth. So from this somehow original state, the base of our true existence, something happens, a big bang, a universe, atoms, molecules, matter, gases, formations, conditions, temperatures, elements, organic things and biological things, and us. I mean, from fucking nothing. Find the source of it. Well, it's quote unquote, it is birthless. So birthless. Words are worthless. But we got to get somehow up to the temple and humble ourselves and allow ourselves to be stripped and stripped and stripped and stripped. And see, if you're in some bullshit cult and you pay a bunch of money for that and they're milking you and you're fucking a weirdo cult zombie, they're stealing things that happen in true, real spiritual practice and cultifying it and monetizing it. And you're fucking ridiculous if you're in it. So, ba feng to any of that. I only talk real shit. This is not your grandma, your great grandma, your supermarket, or your local weekend workshop, or your, yoga teacher down the street. Typically, some get it. Some get stuff. I get good yoga, but the deal is that our present circumstances, the moment, the experience that we're in. Okay, we're in empty space. We already can't find an origin or a source. Looked for, it cannot be found. Listened for, it cannot be heard. But if you listen, that was from the back of a book from a Kung Fu David Carradine supermarket. I was in maybe 5th grade. Felt for, he cannot be touched. That was some cool Zen, sensei, super warrior, Kung Fu, super flow Tai Chi, mother of all, mother of all Kung Fu, kind of stuff in there, some real stuff when it came up and about, which I was, in my 70s, coming out of that Bruce Lee, these kinds of thoughts led me to look for martial arts books, which were often not in fitness areas, but in Eastern mysticism areas. I mean, I've written about this. But how do we birth the birthless? Well, we got to go to the Dharma, find the Dharma, get into the refuge of the Dharma that we've talked about for a bunch of episodes here, work into the Bodhisattva of compassion path, do what, we say in 12-step and abandon oneself, but not in a super culty, stupid way, in a conscious, empowering, knowing what the fuck kind of way. And in a way, and you're sharper. I mean, at least from my perspective and my development as a spiritual practitioner, there's absolutely no way to describe the development. But at the same time, we bring ourselves, wherever we go. And even bodhisattvas in the 10 bhumis, there's still stains of karma, even in the subtle conscious layers, they say. And so, we can't think we're too holy, really, and get away with it for too long, or think we're too pure. But if we just get naked, like we used to say in AA in the 80s, get naked. And you know what? That's a dope meaning, because, what does it mean to be naked? There's no, what does clothing do? It blocks the view of you. So to be naked is to have nothing blocking the view. And so in the view that we're looking for here is, again, another metaphor from my early recovery. What we're looking for, we're looking with. Chuck Chamberlain, new pair of glasses. No separation between the fish and the water. But just sitting undisturbed. Just being undisturbed, even if we're moving. Even if we're involved in activity, to be as engaged and as present. So I was trying to get some people to be present. I was trying to get someone to be present. I can't remember who it was. Oh, I asked someone earlier to be present and to check in with how they were, like I would do in a meditation or in a yoga class. And the answer was, good. I'm like, no, I'm not asking for an answer. No, I'm good. Okay, but I'm just saying, check in mindful presence with me for a moment. No, I'm fine. I'm good. Not like, no, I'm fine. But it's like, oh, no, I'm good. Like, just not even, like, sometimes people are impenetrable to presence. So, I don't know. I just got to be in my own presence. My dogs are pretty present. All stretched out, all comfy cozy, living a new life, doing a lot better. Last night, a dog from up the way, was out and running around, and a little skinny, scared little thing, and I just, brought her in. And she laid at my feet all night, and, she was on the floor, and her belly was, it was on the cold floor, and I thought, God, how am I going to get a blanket under her? And then she started to get more and more comfortable and less, like just laying there, just terrified, kind of. But she knew always, and animals always know they can come to me. Wherever I go, anyone who's around me knows that. And the animals know that. And anyways, I just, we lay down on the floor with her, like out in the dirt outside, the times that I first made contact with her. I could see that, she just would come up and kind of lay on her belly and like really be cowering, So I became much smaller and less intimidating and changed my whole voice. And then once I communicated that with her, and I'm getting better at this with new dogs, and now it's happening more often, and it's more psychic than ever. But I connect with them, and then they know, then they understand, and our connection is there, and it won't be broken by me, it won't be broken by them. So it's as good as having a connection with any dog right away, just if you just get with them and you learn how to do that. So I do that from the heart center. Now we can say heart center in yoga, but but what do we mean by heart center? Here, heart essence, heart sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Well, the Prajnaparamita Sutra. So the essence of Zen practice really is to come to this experience, but really it's kind of like, they're not really living in it. The only way to live in the experience for a lot of that culture or that system is really to kind of sit and stare only. A lot of times sitting and staring and not moving and living. I mean, it's not all the Buddha did is sit and stare. The teachings refer to the 4 moments. Is it walking, eating, sleeping, and standing? I wrote it in a book somewhere. But I think that's what it is. It's not one moment of sitting still, although it's great if that's what it takes for you to get stillness. But I don't know. I didn't really get it. I mean, it was maybe a good training ground. But to get to the heart essence, empty, pure, yet bright and clear. Empty, pure, yet bright and clear. Radiant joy, radiant Buddha, radiant heart Buddha. Buddha of radiant joy. The Buddha's manifesting infinite at space. Buddha's manifesting out of every pore of our body, and every pore of those Buddhas manifest Buddhas out of every pore of their body. We can sit in basic awareness, and we can be sort of locked into that and then kind of get scared to do other things like think. But then ultimately, if we're really going to be in the birthless state, well, thinking or not thinking doesn't really matter. So if any of this is interesting the way I talk about it, I mean, I've just been a practitioner in this for a long time, but you can go to the Yeshe Namkai. You can look up Yeshe Namkai. You can listen to some of the teachings from Igor on my website, podcast.compassionaterecovery.us. So if we can be birthless, just like sitting in a Zen experience for a while, it's sort of like, really, and this was the whole point of bringing up Zen, is that, sitting in that experience for a while, 2, 3, 4, 5 days into a retreat, it's not that there's a me breathing. There's just breathing. And if you can relax while sitting up straight and be still for long enough and good enough, and I suppose I learned to do that well enough, but what I was doing internally when I was sitting still changed the moment I met the Dzogchen master. So it's not that I'm not doing Zen, it's just that I'm kind of doing Zen and some things, and many, many, many things that aren't discussed in that really thing. But the experience is this beginning of prajna paramita. So it's not something that, okay, so you had this moment and now you're enlightened. No, it's like you got to learn how to live in it all the time, in all movement. And, we know when we're enlightened when our body bursts into rainbows and all that's left are hair and nails, or even not that. There's a pure transcendence that doesn't even leave that. So, and I don't think it's called that exactly, but my apologies, but the birthless state isn't something to be found somewhere else. The birth of our awareness, to use ordinary presence inside time to apply unconditioned presence to, to the next. And, in that space and in that state, there's hundreds of thousands of written tantras discussing how to proceed. I'm just saying the birthless state is your seat if you want to sit in it. But once you sit in it, I can't talk to you about it. The tongue of the Buddha failed to transmit the state in words. I mean, Buddha played the drum. There was a teaching, the sound. Enter the sound dimension. Embody sound. There's not a you listening to sound. There's sound, vibration, the om. We can ohm it up. There's nothing better than ohming it up in a yoga class with like 50 other people. Ohming from the heart. So this is how we can bring our refuge and our bodhicitta into daily life. This is how we can try to understand life, by being aware, by being willing to consider, by understanding, by contemplating, by looking, by learning, by trying to apply, by failing, only by failing. Do we learn anything? Nothing is possible without the failing. But as, speaking of Zen, Joko Beck said, well, we fail until we don't. But what is until we don't? What's after that in one system and one tradition is different, because there's evolution and development. There's lots of levels and layers of consciousness and dimensions and things to do and achieve and accomplish to get to that state of total Buddhahood. But you have the responsibility to do it. You got a toolkit. The birthless state isn't separate from us. It isn't something to be achieved, changed, manipulated, conceptualized, made real, made unreal, pushed away, pulled towards you, embraced. But all that is just bullshit, stupid words. Well, let's just go there for a second. If you're driving, don't do this, but do it later. Inhale. Fill up spaciously into the throat. Fill up spaciously from the bottom. Exhale. Don't push it out. Just let it. I know you didn't do it right, because nobody ever does it right the first time. So really let it out. So when you exhale, just pause there in empty space and linger. And allow yourself to just drop into a dream state of conscious awareness. So inhale. And when I say let it all go, let yourself go. To understand this, as Longchenpa said, to be free of elaborations, frail elaborations of existence or non-existence. A little bit of Heart Sutra going on there in the same kind of context, but with much more to say beyond a glimpse of emptiness that could qualify you perhaps as a Zen teacher or something, or whatever marketing you want to do. But it's not just some little experience in a moment, and it's never going to even be that same experience again. To be attached to it and to cling to it defeats the purpose entirely. It means we know nothing. There was a guy in AA named Bruce H., and he said, I can't stay sober today on yesterday's 12-step work. Bruce Hamola, may he rest in peace. So our experiences of spiritual feelings and evolution isn't something that happened and now it's happened and now you're done. It's something that never stops evolving until you become totally integrated into Buddha in all aspects, until we transcend the physical domain. The birthless is right there waiting for you. It's right there, right here, right now, not somewhere else. Okay, so applying this in daily life, taking steps like a Buddha, being present to this awareness, being an ordinary presence, but really trying to get into that presence of really being aware of all senses. But pause there until everything becomes still, but then begin to move and stay present. Some people do this in yoga classes. Hint, hint. Okay, guys. Happy chatting with you. Go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Walmart. Get Compassionate Recovery and have a group that's happening out there. It's not really about groups, but you can sit and study it. You can study it together. You can learn about how to retool your addiction into your enlightenment. That said, I'll see you again soon. Peace out and namaste.